Greetings and good Wednesday morning. It is Wednesday the 16th, obviously the day before St. Patrick's Day. Still 2022, the third decade of the 21st century. And recently I posted a video over the weekend, a conversation I had with an individual who took the time to watch some of my videos and took the time to get involved in the conversation and left some lengthy comments which prompted future videos for me to respond to. And this was all predicated on the original video I made where I was addressing the subject of Jensen Ackles and Joss Whedon and whether or not we can believe what the media is putting out there and whether we can believe the narrative that the media is attempting to frame. Jensen Ackles was a bit simplified. I mean, if you watch the Inside of You podcast, it was belligerently obvious that what the media was attempting to do with clickbait and whatnot was had nothing to do with the actual interview conducted by Michael Rosenbaum. And then, of course, the vitriol that Joss Whedon's been receiving lately. As it would turn out, Miss Sheila Kay and I are both fans of Joss Whedon's content. The quick little backstory to me is I originally started with Angel. Angel was just, I don't know, just the concept, the story, the plot. It was, I don't know, it was just... I guess you could say it appealed to me more so than Buffy did at that point in my life. In 1997, I would have been 22 21. I would have been 21 in 1997 when Buffy first aired, and admittedly I wasn't into what would have been perceived as teeny bopper stuff. Having watched Buffy more recently, it wasn't really teeny bopperish, but at that time in my life, when I found Angel, I was more into Angel. And then, of course, I would later discover Firefly, having watched Serenity. It took a little while before I was more familiar with Joss Whedon and his content, and I've made an effort to seek out his content. I also wasn't completely up to speed with his movies, per se. As in the Avengers and all that. I mean, obviously I've seen the Avengers and whatnot, but didn't really put a whole lot of effort into, well, who did this? Who, whatever. And Joss Whedon's received quite a bit of vitriol as of late. Now, as I do from time to time, I could fall down the rabbit hole and just ramble on about that. So Miss Sheila and I got together previously during the week, last week, and had a quick Zoom to kind of get to know each other a little bit, and maybe, you know, in getting to know each other, kind of establish what sort of things, more importantly, she didn't want shared on the internet. And it was great. We also reached the conclusion that on certain subjects we may disagree. But at no point in time did either one of us try to dehumanize the other or demonize the other. And I think we're going to try to reconnect to make a video discussing our thoughts and opinions on Supernatural, specifically the ending. But if I could do this in less than 15 minutes, I wanted to address the video we did make. First and foremost, it directly represents what this channel was all about. We can have a difference in opinion, we can see the world differently, we can think and feel differently, even if that is a result of the sum total of our experiences. And yet we don't have to demonize the other person. We don't have to dehumanize the other person. We can still recognize other people as rational, productive members of society who just have a different perspective and a different viewpoint. And aside from feeling that honestly and thinking that honestly, the one thing I started to notice as I thought more and more about the video we made is we had two different perspectives. Not that I'll say this. I wasn't madly in love with my perspective. Okay, I wasn't overly attached to my perspective, but because of experiences in my past, and far be it for me to determine how far back has to be recent. As I grow older, time goes by way faster than it used to. And Sheila had some of her own experiences that, in my interpretation, have affected her quite deeply, giving her a very impassioned, if I hope I'm saying that right, but a very passionate and a very emotional connection to certain subject matters, where one of the things we tried to establish was that she was going to advocate for the accusers, as in, basically, when it comes to Joss Whedon, the people accusing him of inappropriate behavior. And then, basically, I would advocate for Joss Whedon, the accused. Where to be, and I tried to make this as clear as I could, I was not necessarily defending him as in, from a place of extreme love and extreme concern. It was just, to be completely honest, from my personal experiences having been accused, to include where in my heart, I feel I've been wrongly accused. All right, and I'm more than happy to share that, and I'm more than happy to listen to other people's opinions on it. I'm not going to guarantee that I will agree with you. I'm not going to promise that I will agree, but I'm more than happy to listen. But as somebody who'd been accused, as somebody who had felt in their heart of hearts that they were wrongly accused, and remembering what that felt like emotionally inside, the turmoil, the anger, the angst, everything that I felt as somebody having been accused, and as somebody who felt legitimately wrongly accused. But it's like the victor goes to the one who strikes first. If the accusers are the ones who strike first, then they also have the opportunity to establish it as fact. They have the opportunity to establish it as, the truth. And then it's up to the accuser or the accused to defend themselves, and they're already behind the eight ball because somebody else spoke out first and had the first opportunity to establish it as truth and fact. So having had that experience, I was drawing from those experiences and the emotions I felt during those experiences, and from Miss Sheila, between her academic history, her professional history, and her personal history, she was drawing deeply from those experiences, and I couldn't help but get the impression, and I hope it came through in the video, she had some very deep-rooted connections to the, what's the word I'm looking for? Not the topic. She was deeply connected to the topic. And I wasn't necessarily as deeply connected to the topic itself as much as I was trying to ask the question, is everything what it seems? All right? Is it really what it is? Was there any room for ambiguity? Was there any room for misinterpretation? Was there any room for any other perspective? And at least what I got out of it was, based on her emotional connection, there isn't. That it is 100% what it is. And she's not wrong. She's not right. She's Sheila. She's allowed to feel exactly how she feels. And that goes for anybody and everybody. And equally and opposite on my side of the coin. I can feel however I want. It just makes me who I am. It doesn't make me right. It doesn't make me wrong. I think you have to establish certain parameters, though, where, all right, I'm not trying to gain anything from this, and I don't think Miss Sheila's trying to gain anything from it either. Where that's where I often have questions too. Like, for the accusers, is there anything you're attempting to gain? All right, I think that's a fair question. I don't think it's delegitimizing anybody. I think it's fair to ask, okay, what are you attempting to gain, if anything? All right, and the answer might be nothing, and the answer could be something. All right, I think it's fair to ask these questions, and as I said, because I'm trying to limit this to an additional 4 minutes, I at least felt that Miss Sheila had a very deep and personal connection where it was very, very difficult for her to overcome her experiences, and equally and opposite, probably the same for me. And what I admired about the whole thing is we both admitted to having bias. We both admitted to having a tremendous amount of bias that potentially obscured our objectivity, while at the same time recognizing we had these biases and recognizing that our objectivity may have been obscured, and that, you know, while it may have made for a great conversation and it may have been good for the both of us to just have the conversation with somebody that had a different point of view on the subject without devolving into arguments and name calling and slandering. If there was an attempt to find a solution, if there was an attempt to solve an equation, I don't think either one of us were well equipped to do so, because I don't know that either one of us were able to reach a point of neutral objectivity where we could have done that. And I think on one hand that is okay. All right, I think that it just is what it is. You know, based on our own personal experiences, there's enough bias at play where we can't find neutral ground to see things as objectively as possible. And I think that's fine, because, you know, it has to be, right? You know, it is what it is. But at the same time, you know, how do people move forward? You know, I posed the question to Sheila. I was like, well, whether it was an inability to form relationships, or whether it was, you know, the unfortunate truth of the matter, which is sometimes people just don't get along. You know, it's the unfortunate truth of humanity. Some people will just clash with one another. They just won't get along. I mean, that's why we have military forces, to protect our interests, because human beings will in fact clash. So I often wonder if there's more simpler things. You know, I often wonder if it's more complex. I wonder if it's more nuanced. And as we were trying to have that discussion, I could not help but get the impression that bias on either side was clouding the issue, and neither one of us were going to find a more neutral, objective point of view or perspective or solution because of our bias. With my experiences having been accused and feeling wrongly accused, obviously I've got a tremendous amount of bias, you know, in the form of the accused. All right, and then equally and opposite with her experiences. Not saying that she's a habitual accuser, so if anybody gets that opinion, you're wrong. But she also said she sees the accusers as victims, and hopefully I'm not conflating that, and I'm sure she'll correct me. But she sees them as victims who are speaking out, and she has a tremendous emotional connection to that. And she even freely admitted to having bias. And the one question I asked is, like, how do we move forward? Can you still enjoy Joss Whedon's content? Can you still enjoy the stories? Can you still appreciate the work that the actors put in? Can you still appreciate the work all the other crew members put in, regardless of the fact that the story creator, the concept creator, may not have been the absolute best person in the world? And if I'm not mistaken, and I'm sure Miss Sheila will correct me if I'm wrong, I think she said, no, she can't, that it is forever tainted. And again, maybe it's my personal bias. Maybe it's the fact that, you know, the bias I bring to the table because I feel as though I've been wrongly accused. I choose to enjoy the content. You know, I choose to accept the fact that, you know, Joss may not have gotten along with everybody. Joss may have been perceived as being cruel. And who knows? For whatever reason, circumstances, whatever, he may have been individually cruel to individual people. I'm not, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not condoning poor behavior. I'm not advocating poor behavior. And I'm not necessarily giving him a pass. And I've said this before, based on comments he's made on certain other topics and subjects, I don't know that Joss is somebody I would necessarily get along with if I got to know him any better. All right? If I was attempting to get to know him as somebody other than a content creator, I don't know that he's somebody I would necessarily get along with. I know I would not see eye to eye with him sociopolitically. Um, and, you know, as I said before, because of my bias, because of my own personal bias, you know, I try really hard to avoid seeing things that directly support my confirmation bias. Like, oh, he was recently divorced, and then as soon as his ex-wife makes disparaging comments about his character, it seems as though other people felt as though they had the green light because the timing was right. The Me Too movement, his wife's comments, and then, you know, other people, you know, and again, all that does is that plays into my bias. And tragically, depending on how people perceive information, some people can perceive it as though I'm attempting to delegitimize people who are accusing Joss, people who may be legitimate no-shit victims of inappropriate behavior. And not that I'm trying to take the easy way out, but the truth is I was not there. I was not the fly on the wall who could provide the third story. Joss's story, the accuser's story, and the truth, which lies in between. All right? It's not that I'm trying to take a lazy way out. It's just, you know, that is an unfortunate fact. There's three sides to every story. There's yours, there's mine, and somewhere in between is the truth. My version of the story is going to support me. Your version of the story is going to support you. And in the middle is the truth, which supports nobody but the truth. So yeah, I wasn't there. I can't objectively say, you know, what I saw. Well, Joss was under a lot of stress. This person was being a whiny bitch. I just don't know. The one thing Sheila and I did agree with, and I've gone over the 15 minutes I set as a goal for myself, there was an article done in Vulture, and it was done over the course of 2 days, in which case Joss had apparently just completed some treatment for various things. Apologize that I can't remember, but that has very little to do with the point. The point is, it was his opportunity to more or less make his case, essentially defend himself, answer certain questions, and again, not having been there, it doesn't seem as though the reporter's questions got answered. I'm not entirely sure if the reporter was able to ask a lot of questions. There was a lot of contextual fluff about backstories, this, that, or the other, because I'm guessing, and Sheila and I both kind of, I wouldn't say we agreed, but we both kind of reached a similar conclusion, was that he didn't really answer the questions to the best of his ability. He did a lot of deflecting. In my opinion, he seemed like he was under the influence of something, and he was very melancholy and whatnot, and he was very aloof and flippant. In which case, where we do agree is that it was his one opportunity to put his best foot forward and defend himself and try to explain himself and maybe even apologize. And I don't know that he did. Granted, we are relying on somebody else to interpret the events of what happened, jot it down on paper, and then report it to the masses. Is there room for error? Yes. But foregoing that, on the surface, the Vulture article, Joss did not maximize that opportunity. And it also did not help his case. It's like, okay, Joss, now it's your turn. Let's knock this out of the park. All right? Let's find some middle ground. Take blame if there's blame. You know, defend yourself if you need to defend yourself. You know, let's do this. You know, you've made great content. I want more. And he didn't. He didn't. All right? I mean, just from Buffy alone, Charisma Carpenter, Amber Benson, and Michelle Trachtenberg all had disparaging things to say. Charisma had the most because she was on 2 projects, Buffy then Angel. You know, and if anybody had spent the most amount of time with him, it was those 3 at least. And nobody refuted their comments, as in other stars who had better relationships with Joss. And Josh didn't necessarily refute their comments, which is kind of weird. So, yeah. Otherwise, I think I'll just be rambling on if I just keep going down the rabbit hole. So, hopefully y'all enjoyed the video. At the end of the day, I don't know where to go from here because, you know, we're all going to have confirmation bias. All right, we can try desperately hard to overcome the bias, But as I think our conversation between Miss Sheila and I think the proof is it can be very difficult to overcome confirmation bias in how you attempt to approach certain concepts. But the one thing I think Sheila and I did overcome was, in spite of our bias, we had a very polite conversation, and we were able to converse with one another in spite of the fact that we saw things differently. And it's just proof that we can do this. As people, we can do this. We can have a different perspective, we can have a different thought, we can have a different feeling, different belief, and yet we can still have discussions, and we don't have to rely on mass media telling us what to think and believe. And I apologize if you think that's some sort of QAnon nonsense. That's just rational nonsense, okay? Media is trying to tell us how to think. Media is trying to tell us who to be friends with. Don't have to agree with it. And if you don't, get involved in the conversation. Let's have a conversation about it. You defend your point of view, I'll defend mine. And let's try to be calm, rational adults. Till then, you're awesome.